Hi, my name is Jennifer. Today I will discuss dysgraphia. Dysgraphia is a specific learning disorder affecting written expression and is common in elementary, middle, and high school students with ADHD and autism. It's a term that is no longer used officially in the manual that we use to diagnose learning disorders. In the DSM-5, the term dysgraphia isn't used anymore. However, dysgraphia is still used by people to talk about their difficulties with written expression. It's like dyslexia is a neurodevelopmental condition. It's caused by difficulties with cognitive processing and is heritable. It runs in families. We don't quite know how many people have dysgraphia, but within the population, we are looking at 1.166% of population having a specific learning disorder for children aged 2 to 4 years, including 1.59% of the population were males and 0.73% of population were females. The study reported dysgraphia in 58% of students with ADHD and in 50% of those with autism for children 6 to 16 years of age, despite the fact that dysgraphia is widespread in kids with ADHD or autism at all ages. No study has looked at the prevalence of dysgraphia by age in a single sample of students. 2.7% of adults have a specific learning disorder aged 7 to 15 years and 17.7% of adults with a specific learning disorder. Now let's see how it works in the reading brain. The left temporal cortex recognizes differentiation of phonemes similar in sound, opposite consonants, soft and hard consonants, which meaning process phonemic information. Prefrontal cortex, especially broadcast area, whose role is differentiation of phonemes in complex combination of consonants. Frontal lobe of the brain is linked to writing. It contains 3 foundational units and units of programming, regulation, and control. Here is planning, initiation, and control in writing, and control in using punctuation and orthographic rules. The beginning stage of the reading relies heavily on frontal lobe and the parietal temporal lobe, which are associated with one discerning the sound in language, which we call phonology, and the slow decoding of words. Dysgraphia problems are most consistently seen in the parietal lobe, which is the part of the brain that integrates visual and motor processing. We all know people with dysgraphia struggle to read. Parietal temporal control visual analysis of letters, which have only visual spatial differences. These areas retain information for writing in the working memory. All children start decoding pretty slow, and struggling readers continue slow reading. The brain region associated with the automatic word reading is occipital temporal, which is down at the back of the brain. The occipital temporal area is commonly referred to as the word form. This would be associated with automatic phase of reading. This area of working harder means after all of that instruction and experience with words, and we call that part of orthographic processing. Orthographic memory is an important part of both writing and reading, which store letters and words in the occipital temporal area. Orthographic coding is holding written words in memory. The underlying causes of the disorder are not fully understood, but dysgraphia is known to be a biologically based disorder with genetic and brain basis. More specifically, is working memory problem caused by specific neurodevelopmental dysfunction. In a dysgraphia, individuals fail to develop normal connection among different brain regions needed for writing. People with dysgraphia have difficulty in automatically remembering and mastering the sequence of motor movements required to write letters or numbers. Dysgraphia is also in part due to underlying problems in orthographic coding. The orthographic loop and the grab motor output by one's hands, fingers, and executive functions involved in letter writing. The orthographic loop is when written words are stored in the mind's eye, connects through sequential finger movement for motor output through the hand with feedback from the eye. Children with dysgraphia don't have primary developmental motor disorder, another cause of poor handwriting, but may have difficulty planning sequential finger movements, such as the touching of some two successive fingers on the same hand without visual feedback. Children with dysgraphia may have difficulty with both orthographic coding and planning sequential finger movements. Family history of specific learning disability may play a role. It's been observed that children with developmental dysgraphia may be more likely to have family members with one of these conditions. Genetic studies suggest that verbal executive function tasks, orthographic skills, and spelling ability may have a genetic basis. Genes on chromosomes 6 and 15 may play some role on SLDs as they have linked a poor reading, poor spelling, and lower phonemic awareness. When dysgraphia develops in adults, the cause is usually a stroke or other brain injury. In particular, injury to the brain's left parietal lobe may lead to dysgraphia. You have right and left parietal lobe in the upper part of your brain. Each is associated with a range of skills, such as reading and writing, as well as sensory processing, including pain, heat, and cold. At an early age, these students are asked to forego recess to finish copying material from the board, and are likely to be sent home at the end of the day with a shelf of unfinished papers to be complete. They are asked to recopy their work, but the second attempt is often no better than the first, because they are often bright and good at reading. Their failure to produce acceptable work is blamed on laziness or carelessness. The resulting anger and frustration can prevent their ever reaching their true potential. Information processing theories focus on sequencing difficulties encountered in writing. Problems in sequencing and organizing thoughts and writing behaviors implicate executive function skills such as initiation, shifting, and sustained attention, which have been found to differentiate poor from good writers. The neurological impairment theory looks at the different brain areas and systems involved in writing and hypothesizes that these are dysfunctions in how the areas and the systems interact. Bowler reported from their study of a referral sample of individuals with learning or academic problems that all the models these tests, with the exception of neurological model, were related to writing behaviors. Before school, children with dysgraphia cramp fingers, mixing upper and lower case letter forms, inconsistency in folding letters, and awkward pencil grip, and they also show difficulty managing margins, irregular letter formation, size, or line placement. At school age, children show these symptoms: avoid writing tasks and crying, inefficient pencil pressure, writing letter and number reversals, and odd position of the waist or paper. They will show obvious poor motor skills, letter organization, spelling, and use of lines. Next part is assessment. It's important to get to the bottom of your child's writing issues in order to know how to address them. If a student has excessive erasure and strike over, so it's simple show words out the line. As we can see, there is a mixture of upper and lower case letters, like capital B, P, D, and so sometimes capital letters are automatic for them. Another assessment is inconsistent letter formation or slant. We may see irregular letter size, the beginning with pretty large letters, but then we can see pretty small. The spacing is very inconsistent, not only between words, but within words. Berninger for using handwriting tests and other evidence-based assessment procedures in early identification, prevention, and diagnosis for linking assessment results to evidence-based handwriting and spelling instruction. The Minnesota Handwriting Assessment development by Judith Reisman. It aims to assist school-based occupational therapists in the identification of children with writing difficulties treatment. MHA can determine speed, accuracy, letter size, spacing, and can show where students' difficulties are. Occupational therapists working within school health support service received increasing number of referrals of children who have handwriting difficulties. Having a full evaluation for learning and attention issues will show specific areas of weakness and can lead to effective services both in and out of school. Occupational therapists for strength and stability, aggressive letter formation, keyboarding, visual processing, and sensory processing challenges. Educator or speech therapists for phonemic awareness, conceptualization, graphic, organizer, and more. Now let's talk about opportunity challenges. When children struggle with writing, spelling, and reading, it can have an impact on how well they learn and perform at school. Having poor transcription skills makes it hard for kids to do writing work, copy notes, and perform well on tests. The writing is usually messy and hard to read. The various transcription skills are related, so it's not unusual for children to have difficulty with more than one. For example, when those skills are weak, both spelling and handwriting suffer. Some of the most common issues that co-occur are dyslexia, ADHD, and motor skill problems, like developmental coordination disorder. Dysgraphia doesn't just affect English class, it affects every class because writing is required for taking notes, answering math problem, writing science report, and so much more. Then is strengths. Where these challenges can affect learning, it's important to know they have nothing to do with intelligence. Dysgraphia stands in the way of academic success. Students with dysgraphia in the United States are eligible for special educational service and are adapted to be placed in categorical classroom programs designed for children with specific learning disability. In DSM-5, American Psychiatric Association mentions that dysgraphia is not listed expressly in the definition specific learning disability, which means dysgraphia is not under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. But this disorder is covered by the Learning Disabilities Association of Ontario. It's the provincial association representing the interests of persons with learning disabilities throughout Ontario. Recommendations for policy. First, the government can increase budget on disability education. Then they can support special school building. The school is affiliated with a public school for students who have handwriting problems, but not in special education, or they don't qualify for services. Dysgraphia is an invisible disability that often goes hand in hand with dyslexia. Like students with dyslexia and dysgraphia are often acutely aware of what they are not capable of relative to their peers. So the third is encourage create a dysgraphia-friendly classroom. I thought it might be helpful for both parents, individual, and the school personnel. In the article, How the Timing and the Quality of Early Experience Influence the Development of Brain Architecture, it mentioned the epigenetic modification of gene expression by chemically altering DNA's protein products. So it also discussed the critical aspects of brain architecture beginning to be shaped by experience before and soon after birth, and many fundamental aspects of the architecture are established where before a child enters school. So further research is needed on this issue because underlying genetic vulnerability may remain as a curricular requirement, change in nature and complexity. For example, one of the most common concerns of parents in the family genetic study whose children had overcoming their reading problems was inability to convince schools to continue helping their children overcome their persisting writing problems in the upper grades. In fact, evidence is growing that one of the most effective ways for overcoming both the reading and writing problem is to provide evidence-based writing instruction and integrate reading-writing instruction beginning in kindergarten and throughout the elementary grades. The Institute Excellence in Writing has programs to teach handwriting. They work on the accuracy of letter production first, then move to automaticity, and then to keyboarding. Now we can see the research into education of professionals in the article Meyers I mentioned in 2019. fMRI finger sequencing contrast, children with dysgraphia in a longitudinal study differ in a brain region associated with orthographic word form processing. And even though tests didn't involve producing writing words by hand, brain activation related to these tests were significantly correlated with handwriting and spelling measures. So professionals have the ability to measure the handwriting and spelling skills is very important for dysgraphia students. The next part we can see the Berninger mentioned. It also requires parents and teacher interviews to gather developmental, educational, and medical histories from birth to school entry and beyond. This specific learning disability differ in predictable ways in which word form or loop skill are impaired. Dysgraphia involves orthographic word form coding. As a result, individuals with dysgraphia are impaired in letter writing, and sometimes spelling there is a relationship to handwriting. For dysgraphia students, low achievement below the population mean on a standardized measure of legible and automatic letter writing is sufficient for diagnosis because handwriting is not correlated with verbal IQ. However, in diagnosing dysgraphia, handwriting in daily classroom work and written assignments should be examined for legibility, and assessment should be conducted of how many writing assignments are not complete or complete on time. For impaired spelling, which is correlated with verbal IQ and vocabulary knowledge, so verbal IQ should be taken into account in diagnosing spelling disability without reading disability. Next part is recommendation for professionals. Dysgraphia individual educational plan is very important. Before school, ECEs can plan clay exercise, give resistive toys such as sticker, tape, rubber hand, and construction toys, as well as spongy space toys. It's important to know about dysgraphia because if students and teachers don't know about it, who may think that incomplete work is due to not starting. A student with dysgraphia doesn't get marked down with low grades because his or her writing is not neat, spelled correctly, or writing as fast as others. For teachers, the most common ways to help students with dysgraphia include reducing the quality of writing work, allowing extra time, allowing students to type or use type of technology, assign a designed note taker, and lastly, important is let them know you will help. The recommendation for self-advocacy students with dysgraphia, they made the first strategy, maybe start early. The young children often worry about teachers don't like kids who remind them of accommodation or ask too many questions. So second strategy is like encourage self-awareness. Then stay positive, support critical thinking, and engage in problem solving. So for this problem solving, they can use the assistive technology so that might include things like spell and grammar checker. They can be used on smartphone, tablet device, and on laptop and computers. Some may find they express themselves through speech far better than they do through writing, and so speech-to-text software might be something that they find useful. Students who need to produce a lot of written work may find literacy support software useful, so those programs help with spelling and grammar correction. But they also help with organization of longer written tasks like reports and essay. Let's talk about recommendation for parents. You also can help children at home. There are fun ways to work on handwriting, spelling, and typing skills that won't feel like extra work to your child. For example, practice yoga, strength training, and swimming. Or activate postural muscles such as moving seats, jaw cushion, ball chair, zone ball exercise. You can search for games, apps, and software that promote these skills. For example, letter school is set to a wet-dry mess, but the most important thing you can do is assure your child that writing problem can improve, no matter what's causing them. Having your support and encouragement can help your child feel more confident and motivated to work on their writing challenges.